Welcome to Obrix, where the untold becomes unforgettable. Don't just watch the world, uncover it. Subscribe now.
War doesn't start with explosions. It starts quietly, with whispers, with fear, with the slow erosion of what's right. In a small village carved into the edges of occupied Europe, a boy named Emil learned that truth early. He was 12, small for his age, always watching, always listening. The soldiers came in spring, boots pounding, flags flying, orders shouted in a language that turned home into foreign ground. His father was taken first, accused of hiding food. His mother taught him one rule: keep your head down. But Emil didn't. He couldn't. The occupation brought curfews, checkpoints, silence. People disappeared. Neighbors, teachers, friends. And one day, Emil found a message hidden in a loaf of bread. It wasn't addressed to him, but curiosity is a dangerous kind of courage. He opened it, and inside were coordinates, a location, a time, a name. He didn't know it then, but that small act of disobedience would make him part of a network that changed the course of the war. In every conflict, there are heroes with medals and stories that make history books. And then there are those like Emil, invisible, forgotten, and yet essential. The ones who fought wars not with guns, but with memory, silence, and the ability to look harmless while carrying the weight of nations in their hands. They didn't recruit him. They didn't have to. War recruits anyone it touches. The resistance saw potential in the boy who slipped past checkpoints unnoticed. He could move where men couldn't. Soldiers ignored him. Officers barely looked his way. That was his weapon: invisibility. He started small, delivering notes, smuggling ration cards, drawing maps from memory. Each errand was a risk. Each success, a new scar on the inside. He learned the art of silence, the way to lie without words. When soldiers questioned him, he'd stare at the ground, wide-eyed, the picture of innocence. They let him go every time. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't carry a gun. But make no mistake, he was a soldier. One message saved 20 lives. One false step could end his. Psychologists who study wartime trauma say children adapt faster than adults. Their brains, still forming, bend to survive. But what bends doesn't always return to shape. Years later, Emil would say he couldn't remember what it felt like to be a child, only what it felt like to be useful. By 1943, the resistance was desperate. Supply lines were thin, armies were starving, and the enemy's intelligence network was tightening like a noose. A plan formed to sabotage a munitions train that supplied the front lines. They needed a messenger, someone who could cross the checkpoint unnoticed and deliver a coded signal to the team waiting near the tracks. Emil volunteered. He shouldn't have. He was only 14. But in war, age stops mattering the day innocence dies. He rode his bicycle through occupied streets, past tanks and flags, pretending to be a delivery boy. In his pocket, a piece of paper wrapped in wax containing everything: the time of detonation, the escape route, the final signal. He reached the checkpoint, heart pounding like artillery fire. A guard stopped him, asked questions. Emil smiled, shrugged, offered him an apple. The guard laughed, took it, waved him through. He made it to the ridge, dropped the signal, and vanished. Hours later, the explosion echoed across the valley. One train less, one victory for the unseen. Historians credit that operation as a turning point. It delayed supplies long enough for the Allied advance to gain ground. But none of the reports mention the boy. Only an unknown courier. That's how child soldiers disappear, into the footnotes of history. Every spy learns that truth is a weapon, and once used, it cuts both ways. Weeks after the mission, the Gestapo swept through the region. Someone had talked. One by one, resistance members vanished. Emil's handler, his teacher, his mother's friend, gone. He lived in hiding, sleeping in barns, surviving on bread crusts and guilt. He didn't know it yet, but his name was already on a list. He was captured in winter. A guard found coded symbols carved under a bridge and traced them back to the boy with too many errands. They brought him in, asked questions. He said nothing. Children are supposed to break, but he didn't. He lied with such conviction they doubted their own evidence. They released him, believing he was just a frightened orphan. But inside, he wasn't a boy anymore. He was something else. A vessel of secrets, a mirror of everything the war had taken. After liberation, survivors spoke of courage, of resistance, of victory. Emil stayed silent. When peace came, he couldn't find himself in it. The hardest part about being a spy isn't lying to others. It's forgetting how to tell the truth. After the war, Europe rebuilt itself. Streets were paved, monuments erected, names carved in stone. But not all heroes fit on memorials. Thousands of children like Emil, boys and girls who carried messages, hid weapons, or acted as lookouts, were quietly erased from the narrative. Governments called them non-combatants. Psychologists called them resilient. But none of those words describe what happens when childhood becomes classified information. Emil grew up, worked odd jobs, rarely spoke of the war. He married, raised a family, smiled in photographs, but his eyes, always scanning, always measuring, never forgot. In 1971, a journalist uncovered declassified resistance archives. Among them, a note. Operation Sparrow, Courier E. It took years, but eventually they found him. Old, quiet, living by the sea. When asked how he felt about it, he paused and said, "People think I was brave. I wasn't. I was afraid every day. I just learned to move anyway." That sentence captures more truth about war than any book. Today, in museums, there are exhibits dedicated to wartime innovation, weapons, uniforms, strategy. But almost nowhere will you find mention of the children who fought with nothing but nerve. Modern intelligence agencies still study the tactics used by wartime couriers, the methods of disguise, the psychological conditioning, the ways fear can sharpen or destroy. But beyond the analysis, there's a moral question that lingers. What does it mean when survival itself becomes a skill taught by violence? Experts now call it intergenerational silence. The trauma of a generation passed quietly to the next. Children of war heroes who never understood why their parents never hugged them long, never talked about the past, never felt at peace. Emil died in 2009. When they cleaned out his home, they found one box, labeled only with his handwriting, maps that never mattered. Inside were sketches of his childhood routes, faded photographs, and a single line written on the back of a ration card. "I did not win the war. I just made it possible for others too." The story of Emil is not about heroism. It's about what war takes and what it asks of the smallest among us. Maybe that's why his story matters now more than ever, because even today, children are being used in conflicts around the world, carrying messages, weapons, and the burden of survival before they even understand what it means. We call them victims, or statistics, or tragedies, but once they were just kids. Kids who dreamed of running, laughing, growing up. The child spy who changed a war never asked to be a part of it. But history doesn't ask permission. And when silence falls after the final shot, it's their voices we owe the loudest remembrance.